In Islam and the Holy Book of the Quran, there exists a controversial figure that many believers of the faith view in different ways. This figure, known as Iblis, is known to some as an angel, and to others he is referred to as a jinn, jinn being supernatural creatures that were created alongside angels and men. The jinn in the case of Iblis are often associated as being evil, and more commonly referred to as shaitan, sometimes coined as the offspring of Iblis. Iblis is mentioned a total of 11 times in the Quran, and for the most part there is one single event that sums up his story, though it is told from a few different perspectives. Essentially, the tale is quite simple, but much can be derived from what takes place. Iblis first appears in chapter 2 of the second surah, a chapter that details the creation of mankind. In 230 onwards, we are told that the angels were not so sure about the creation of mankind, and even questioned God, or Allah, whether he was sure he wished to place humans as the authority on earth. They describe humans as being capable of causing corruption, shedding blood, and go on to outline that they, the angels, would never do such a thing, for they are dedicated to praising their Lord. By this you might say that the angels deem themselves as more worthy to inherit the earth, but Allah tells them that he knows what he is doing, and that he knows that which the angels do not. It essentially shows us that Allah's word is final, and that whatever he wishes to come to fruition will be. We are told that Allah asked the angels to tell him the names of all things, but when the angels could not do so, given that they claimed they did not have the knowledge except for what Allah had already taught them, Allah presented Adam, the first man. He asked Adam the same question, and Adam, who had been taught the name of all things, was able to recite that which the angels did not know. With Adam standing victorious in this contest between man and angels, the angels are told by Allah to prostrate before Adam, which they did, except for Iblis. Iblis here in 234 is described as refusing to do such a thing, and that he was arrogant, and would become one of, if not the first, disbeliever. Iblis is not mentioned again in this chapter, although in some translations he is referenced again in 236, though appears to go under the name Satan. After the angels are done prostrating before Adam, they praise him and implore him to eat from paradise, but not to approach a particular tree. Iblis, or Satan, is then noted as having caused Adam and his wife to slip out of their state of obedience to God, thus alluding to the role of Iblis being a tempter, and it becomes apparent that Adam disobeys Allah and ultimately ignores the advice of the angels. Both Adam, his wife, and Iblis, or Satan, are told to go down as enemies to one another, and that they will have a place of settlement and provision upon earth, but only for a time. In the 7th surah of the Quran, this story is further delved into, as we see Allah's response to Iblis' refusal to bow before Adam. In 7:13, Allah asks Iblis, "What prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you?" And Iblis, again sometimes referred to now as Satan, states, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." Allah does not give him a further chance to explain. He simply tells Iblis in 7:14, "Descend from paradise, for it is not for you to be arrogant therein. So get out. Indeed, you are of the debased." But Iblis makes a request to God in this chapter, and asks for him to be reprieved until the day that the dead are resurrected. He tells God in 7:16 through 17 that, "Because you have put me in error, I will surely sit in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come to them from before them, and from behind them, and on their right, and on their left, and you will not find most of them grateful to you." What he is telling Allah here is that he will serve as a tempter to the human race. He will be present with every one of them, seeking to corrupt them and turn them away from God, and thus expose them as being as unworthy and beneath him as he had originally declared. While Allah does not deny Iblis from taking on this self-imposed role, he does tell him in 7:18, "Get out of paradise, reproached and expelled. Whoever follows you among them, I will surely fill hell with you altogether." By this, we understand that Allah acknowledges Iblis' or Satan's promise, that he would try to turn mankind away from him, and while he is powerful enough to stop him, he doesn't feel the need to. It almost comes across as a challenge from God, where you might say he grants Iblis permission to do whatever he wants, because in the end, whatever the outcome, he'll still win either way. Some might say that God allows Iblis to exist, and to tempt mankind so as to weed out those who do not deserve a place in heaven, and to ensure he only regains the holiest and loyalist of his creations. Once more in chapter 15, we see the same events unfold, where it is told again in 15:30 through 32, all the angels prostrated, all of them entirely, except Iblis. He refused to be with those who prostrated. In this perspective, Allah asks him what is the matter with him, and asks him why he is not doing as the others have done. 15:33 sees Iblis reply, "Never would I prostrate to a human who you created out of clay, from an altered black mud." Allah very simply replies in 15:34, "Then get out, you are expelled." Once more we see Iblis make the same deal, that he will be reprieved until the last day, and that he will make disobedience and sin attractive to those on earth, and would seek to mislead them all. However, what's interesting here, in 15:39 through 40, is that Iblis actually concedes that while he will try to mislead all those on earth, he will not be successful in deceiving Allah's most loyal servants. He states, "I will mislead them all, except among them your chosen servants." Allah confirms this in 1542, that Iblis will have no authority over them, except those who choose to follow Iblis, for they are deviators, and that there is only one place for him and them, which is hell. Chapter 17 sees the tale told again, only this time we see Iblis go a step further and declare in 1762, "I will surely destroy Adam's descendants, except for a few meaning those who are loyal to Allah and live their lives as he intended." By this, Iblis truly believes that the majority of people will side with him and choose his sinful ways over the path of righteousness. But Allah hardly seems concerned as he goes on to tell Iblis, "Go, for whoever of them follows you, indeed hell will be a recompense for you, an ample recompense, and incite to senselessness whoever you can among them with your voice, and assault them with your horses and foot soldiers, and become a partner in their wealth and their children and promise them." This shows us that Allah is not intimidated or affected by Iblis in any way. He even provides Iblis with ideas on how to tempt his creations, because he knows that even if Iblis is successful in his temptations, they will all burn in hell, except those who have remained loyal to him, the best of the best, if you will. Chapter 20, 34 and 38 also include the same sentiments echoed regarding Iblis, that he is banished for his refusal to bow before Adam and maintains a disdain for humanity and a will to prove God wrong. Iblis's role causes him to be perceived by some to be the creator of evil in the world, that he uses evil furthermore to incite men to do wrong, or to incite men against one another and God. However, others believe that Iblis is a mere creature, a Jinn, or a father of Jinn, and that his powers only allow him to take advantage of humanity's weakness, and that he is only able to exploit man's free will. This is also true in the Quran, as God appears to give permission for Iblis to serve as a tempter, but does not give him permission or power to cause destruction by his own hand. In Sufism, sometimes defined as Islamic mysticism, there are those that believe that Iblis refused to bow before Adam not because he saw Adam as beneath him, but because he was devoted to Allah and Allah alone. By this, Iblis becomes less of an antagonistic force and becomes more of a tragic and misunderstood character. With this idea, some Sufi choose to diminish the idea that Iblis was evil, and that's usually because dualism is not compatible with the Sufism belief system. By reducing the evil entity of Iblis, it takes away the theme of good and evil, and even paints Iblis in a more noble light. Sufi accounts of Iblis conversing with Moses exist, where Iblis tells Moses that he refused Allah's order to bow before Adam because the command itself was a test. Moses challenges this, however, stating that if it was a test, he should have passed and not been condemned, to which Iblis replies that his condemnation is temporary and that his love to God is absolute. By this, you might say that Iblis is something of an undercover agent for God, serving as a being that tests man to see which ones are worthy of heaven and which ones are not. The fact that Iblis declares his condemnation is temporary implies that his role as a tempter will not last forever, and that perhaps in the end times he will be absolved by Allah and be reintroduced to heaven. With this in mind, you might say that they are secretly allies, and that Iblis is actually one of God's most loyal servants, that he is willing to take the role as the bad guy if only to serve God's greater plan. However, not all who follow the Sufi teachings are in agreement with this depiction of Iblis being a secret good guy. Others view Iblis as the manifestation of the greatest sin, and that his refusal to bow before Adam was indeed simply his own arrogance, that he believed he was better than man, and that he takes his role as a tempter on his own accord, out of vengeance or loathing for man. There also exists a debate within Islam as to what Iblis was. Some argue that Iblis was an angel, or even an archangel, whilst others agree that Iblis was a Jinn, or the very first Jinn. Scholars in favour of Iblis being a Jinn argue that while angels are created from light, Iblis was created from fire. Already, given his conception, he is different from the angels, and therefore possibly something else entirely. Some scholars also argue that Iblis had offspring, but that angels do not procreate or are able to give birth, so once more, Iblis must be something else entirely. Furthermore, a more damning piece of evidence in their favour is that the Quran even tells us that Iblis was a Jinn in chapter 18 verse 50, where we are told, "And the angels prostrated before Adam, except for Iblis. He was of the Jinn, and departed from the command of his Lord." Scholars and believers in favour of Iblis being an angel, however, argue that there is nothing to say that God couldn't create an angel from fire, or anything else for that matter. By this, they argue that there were either other angels created from fire, or that Iblis was the only angel created from fire, which may contribute to his attitude of self-importance and superiority. To combat the idea that angels do not procreate or give birth, they argue that God must have given Iblis free will to disobey him in the first place, and that when his free will was given, passion and lust were also given too, thus making Iblis a unique sort of angel, who was not only created from fire, but also demonstrated more human tendencies. Others suggest that the confusion between Iblis's nature as either an angel or a Jinn stems from a belief that Iblis was a Jinn who was pretending to be an angel. Others believe that both arguments are correct, in a sense that Iblis may have been both angel and Jinn at some point. The idea is that he was born an angel, admittedly created by flame, but that after Allah condemned him, he was stripped of his angelic qualities and turned into a Jinn for his disobedience. Another variation of this is that Iblis was a Jinn who was created from fire during a time in which angels were battling the Jinn on earth. The tales go that on one occasion, the angels took a group of Jinn as prisoners, and that Iblis was amongst them. They were taken to heaven, and Iblis impressed upon the angels, given that unlike the other Jinn, he had morals and demonstrated piety. So impressed by him, he was incorporated into the company of the angels, and essentially became one of them. He was granted the outward appearance of an angel, but deep down, he was still a Jinn, and thus, unlike a true angel, he maintained a freer will, and was able to defy God when he pleased. Therefore, when asked by God to prostrate himself before Adam, Iblis refused. You might say that given his journey from the bottom to the top, his success may have gone to his head, and that because he was created from fire, unlike man and unlike the other angels, he was as much a unique being as God himself was. Therefore, being asked to bow before man was not just illogical, but also an insult. Like in the other cases, Iblis is banished from heaven, but is granted the reprieve of taking vengeance on the humans, and or attempting to prove he is superior by leading men astray. Some say he maintains his appearance as an angel, despite now surrendering to a more devious nature, which might explain for the confusion about whether he is a Jinn or whether he is an angel. Some believers go a step further and describe Iblis as an archangel, a teacher and leader of the other angels. In this belief, he maintains authority over the lower regions of heaven and the earth, and that he is a commander of the League of Angels who battle the Jinn on earth. In this version, the Archangel Iblis meets the same fate as the Iblis in the Quran, where he refuses to bow before Adam and is therefore condemned and banished. Like in previous accounts, he chooses to serve as the one who leads humanity astray, so as to show God that mankind is not as great as he seems to think, and that while he had served him loyally, the majority of humans will betray him over and over again. God's decision to banish Iblis in the first place and take away his status as an angel reminds believers that the gifts of God can be taken away at any moment, and therefore it is imperative to always be grateful to him. For if he is willing to take away from his angels, then he will most certainly not hesitate to take away from man. Some see Iblis as less of an entity and more of an embodiment of God's anger, an instrument for which he uses to decide who is righteous and who is not. With this in mind, we see Iblis not as a tragic, noble, or even wicked entity, but instead a physical manifestation that is a part of God. A darker, more cunning side, constantly testing his subjects. Other tales have it that they are jinni, or fiery angels, which differ from regular jinn, that are bound to earth and take a more monstrous or demonic form. These tales have it that Iblis was not a jinn, but instead one of these jinni, hence why he is able to impress upon the angels in the first place, because he is not a monster nor a demon and is capable of goodness. These jinni are said to have been related to the angels, or otherwise angels that were sent down to earth to experience the corporealness of the human body, and to experience bodily pleasure. In this version, Iblis is one of them, and while they were loyal to God initially, they soon turned to stealing, fighting, and shedding blood. Seeing this play out before his eyes, Iblis prayed to be returned to heaven, of which his prayer was eventually answered, only for him to be cast out again when he refuses to bow before Adam. Other scholars tell us that every creature is created in heaven, and so by this logic, Iblis would have been created there too, though not necessarily as an angel. Instead, he would become the very first jinn, or the father of jinn, and would become known to the jinn as Adam would become known to man. In some Islamic traditions and beliefs, Iblis is a hermaphrodite creature, whose children or jinn offspring, or shaitan, split from himself. Other beliefs include that Iblis lays eggs from which demons spawn. As mentioned earlier, the progeny of Iblis outs him as ever being considered an angel, given that angels cannot reproduce. However, some exegesis suggest that Iblis gained the ability to reproduce after he had already lost his angelic state and had gone through the transformation of becoming more of a demon. While of course no one knows what Iblis truly looks like, many depictions of him exist in traditional Islamic art. Many show Iblis as a black-skinned entity, who wears a special head covering, sometimes even a traditional Islamic headpiece, to reflect that he was once a devotee of God. But what do you think about Iblis? Is this entity an angel or a jinn? Or maybe you lean towards the idea that this is an archangel, who had a higher seat above all other angels. Is Iblis a servant of God, or does he act independently so as to spite the human race and expose them to God? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Until the next time, guys.